Quick test. If I asked you the price of silver right now, what would you say? Most people will answer whatever their screen shows. And that's exactly why this next phase is going to catch people off guard, because the most important thing happening in silver is not the number on your app. It's the spread between the number on your app and the number people are paying when they actually need metal. Think about it like this. If silver is truly $71, you should be able to buy real deliverable bars anywhere in the world for something close to that, plus a normal premium. Not a premium that feels like a different universe. Not a premium that makes you wonder if you're even looking at the same product. In functioning markets, big gaps don't just sit there and stare at you. Arbitrage eats them alive. That's what global pricing means. Yet lately, physical premiums have been loud enough that people who never cared about silver are suddenly asking, why is there a street price and a screen price? This is the moment where the silver market stops acting like a hobby and starts acting like a strategic resource. Because the second physical buyers treat silver like must-have inventory instead of nice-to-own exposure, the rules change. Paper can be printed, metal can't. And when shortages show up, they don't show up politely. They show up as delays, as weird premiums, as sudden out of stock, as delivery rules getting stricter, as margin requirements getting bumped, as leases that used to be boring suddenly becoming a deadline you can't miss. Here's the part I want you to comment on, because I'm genuinely curious where your brain is. Do you think the official benchmark price is still the real price? Or do you think the real price is what manufacturers are willing to pay to keep production lines alive? Comment one word, benchmark or street. Now let's build the map. Today, this episode is a 5-part investigation into one big question. What happens when the paper market and the physical market stop agreeing? We are going to cover 3 pressure points that are colliding at the same time. Policy tightening that restricts flow vault math that is getting uncomfortable, and a very specific kind of rumor that traders take seriously even when they can confirm every detail. A lease return deadline that turns into a scramble for physical metal. If you're expecting a neat ending, you're watching the wrong asset. Silver never ends neatly. Silver ends loudly. Let us start with the core idea most people still don't understand. Silver is not priced like a normal commodity anymore. It's priced like a system, and systems don't break all at once. They fracture, then they snap. If you want to understand why physical premiums can explode while the benchmark looks sleepy, you have to stop thinking about silver as a metal and start thinking about silver as a supply chain, because supply chains have choke points. And when a major refining and processing hub tightens its rules, licensing, approved exporters, quotas, paperwork delays, it doesn't have to ban anything outright to change the entire market. It can slow the river. And when the river slows, everyone downstream starts paying more for water. Over the last few months, traders have been watching signs of tighter controls in Asia, especially around what can be shipped, by whom, and under what conditions. The details are complicated and they evolve, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend one headline tells the whole story. But the direction matters. If the flow of refined silver gets more restricted, Western buyers have fewer channels to pull from. That pushes more demand into the same venues everyone already relies on: London, New York, and the major dealer networks. And then the market starts playing musical chairs with inventory. What makes silver different from, say, copper or aluminum is that a lot of demand is sticky. Solar manufacturers don't feel like using silver. They need it. Electronics companies don't prefer silver. They spec it. Medical devices don't care about your macro thesis. They care about performance and reliability. When you have sticky demand and a tighter flow, premiums appear first, not because the world is ending, but because the buyers who can't wait simply outbid the buyers who can. That's how a market quietly transitions from investment narrative to procurement panic. And here's the uncomfortable math. If a big chunk of global refined supply becomes harder to access through normal channels, the remaining accessible supply has to do more work. That means every drawdown in visible inventories becomes more meaningful, and every delivery month becomes more watched. So when you hear people say, it's not the price, it's the availability, that's not a meme. It's the real game. That brings us to the vault numbers. Because the moment availability becomes the story, the market starts staring at one category like it's a heartbeat monitor, deliverable inventory. There's a reason serious traders obsess over the word registered. Not because it sounds cool, but because it's the portion of exchange inventory that's typically considered deliverable against contracts under that exchange's framework. And when registered inventories drift lower while delivery demand spikes, you start to see the shape of a problem. Not a price problem, a settlement problem. Now, I'm going to be careful here because people throw numbers around like confetti. Inventory reporting can be misunderstood, categories can shift, and eligible versus registered can confuse everyone. But the trend is what matters. When visible deliverable stocks tighten, the system becomes sensitive to behavior changes. And behavior changes are exactly what you get when physical premiums elsewhere make delivery look attractive. Here, That's the logic chain. If you can buy exposure at a benchmark price and then convert that exposure into a physical bar that sells into a higher premium market, the temptation is obvious. That's arbitrage. It's not ideological. It's not anti-bank. It's math. And when enough participants try to do that at once, you get a feedback loop. More delivery requests, more registered drawdowns, more fear of future restriction, even more delivery requests. It's the same psychology as a bank run, except the deposit is metal. What do exchanges typically do when they feel that stress rising? They try to slow it down. They can raise margin requirements. They can nudge the market toward rolling contracts instead of standing for delivery. They can talk up market stability. They can make it more expensive to hold positions through key windows. None of that proves a grand plot. It proves one thing. They don't want everyone demanding the same thing at the same time. Because if too many people demand physical settlement simultaneously, it exposes the core assumption of the paper market, that most participants will treat contracts as financial instruments, not as delivery tickets. The moment that assumption is threatened, everything you thought was the price becomes the quote. And here's where it gets spicy. The more the physical market refuses to calm down, the more the paper market gets pressured to either catch up or change the rules. There is no stable long-term equilibrium where the world is paying one price for real bars and another price for screen exposure. Something has to reconcile. The only question is how violent the reconciliation is. Now we arrive at the rumor that's lighting people up, a lease deadline. Because deadlines create forced behavior, and forced behavior creates spikes. Let's talk about leasing in plain English. In metals, leasing is basically, I lend you the metal for a period, you give it back later, and we settle the economics along the way. In normal times, it's background plumbing. In tight times, it becomes a spotlight, because the end date is a moment of truth. Can you return physical metal, or do you have to go buy it at any price? Now, there's been chatter about a leaked lease contract involving a major US bank and a major Chinese bank, with a 3-month term and a January return window. I'm not going to claim I've personally verified a document line by line because I haven't, and neither have most people resharing screenshots. But here is why the market cares anyway. The structure fits what you would expect in a tight market, and the timing matters. The timing matters because January is when multiple pressures tend to stack. Policy adjustments begin to bite, procurement schedules reset, delivery windows open, and the market's attention returns after holiday thin liquidity. If a large lease return is due in that window, the borrower has two options: return the metal smoothly, or scramble for physical supply into a market where physical supply is already tense. And if they scramble, that scramble becomes a buyer's panic, not a seller's market. Banks do not like being forced into the spot market for size when the crowd is leaning the same way. That's when price gaps. That's when you see vertical candles that don't care about technical resistance. That's when you get moves that look irrational until you realize they were compulsory. One more angle. If you believe big players have been shifting from paper exposure to physical control, then a lease return deadline becomes even more loaded. Because it's not just an accounting event, it's who has the metal when it counts. And here, what I want you to think about. If you were sitting on a mountain of physical silver and you believed the market was heading into a period where physical demand would be loud and supply would be constrained, would you be lending metal out? Or would you be pulling it back home? Exactly. That's why lease stories hit so hard. They're clues about behavior. And behavior in this market is more honest than any press release. So now the question becomes, what are the plausible endgames from here? Because this cannot stay in limbo forever. Let's land this with realism. There are 3 ways this resolves, and none of them require a sci-fi conspiracy. They require one thing: physical reality eventually forces alignment. Endgame 1, the benchmark reprices upward to reflect physical reality. This is the cleanest solution. The paper price rises fast enough that the premium compresses, not because the premium collapses, but because the headline price catches up. If the market begins to believe physical tightness is persistent, the benchmark stops being a sleepy quote and starts being a chase. Endgame 2. Physical relief arrives and premiums cool. This can happen if supply loosens, recycling increases, inventories get mobilized, some demand delays or policy bottlenecks soften. It's possible. But here's the hard truth. Relief has to be actual metal, not optimism. You can't talk a factory into not needing silver. You can only outsupply it. Endgame 3, market structure changes. This is the messy one. It's when the system tries to protect itself by nudging cash settlement behavior, tightening delivery rules, or quietly pushing price discovery toward venues that can prove physical settlement. If paper credibility weakens, participants migrate. They don't write angry essays, they just move liquidity. And when liquidity moves, the official price becomes irrelevant faster than most people think. Now, how do you watch this without losing your mind? Don't stare at one chart all day. Watch the stress signals, inventory trends, delivery behavior, margin policy, and physical premiums across multiple hubs. When those stay elevated, it's telling you the same thing. This is not just a trade, it's a supply fight. And I'm going to say the part that gets people mad, but I'd rather you be mad than wrecked. If you are using heavy leverage in a market like this, you're playing the wrong game. Silver can be right and still wipe you out. Volatility is how the market shakes weak hands, even when the long-term thesis is correct. If you believe this is structural, you want a position you can survive, not a position that needs perfect timing. So here's your final comment prompt, and I want real answers, not memes. If January is a deadline month, do you expect a final paper smash to scare people out, or do you think the physical tightness has removed the ammo? Comment, last smash or no ammo? And one more, benchmark or street. Which price wins? Because that's what this whole episode is about, not whether silver is up $2, but whether the world is starting to treat silver like a strategic metal with a strategic price. And if that shift is real, the chart is going to look crazy right up until it looks obvious.